Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our community. What did they do to get started, and what are they doing to stay there? And oh my goodness, are you in for a treat today? Because I'm getting to talk with another special leader. Today, I'm talking with Meredith Morris. Meredith is the Director of International Development at Global Expansion. She's also our Texas SHRM Global HR Conference Director for 2023. Meredith, I am so excited to have you on the show. How you doing?
Great. Thank you so much, Bruce. It's a pleasure being here today. Thank you for reaching out. I'm excited to share information with everyone that's listening.
Well, I saw you at our last state meeting that back in January in Dallas, and there was something else. You're also certified. You have a CRP, a GMS. We've known each other from way back in our mobility days, but you also have your SHRM-CP. I think you just got that last year, didn't you?
I did. I just got my SHRM certification last year. It was one of my goals. And so it was something that I was very, very interested in making sure that I continue my learning and my education. So I was so excited. It was tough. I am not going to lie. If anyone's done that certification, it's hard. So it's definitely worth it. If no one's invested in it, I would definitely go for it. It was fantastic.
Yeah, whenever I see people that have that certification, I think about commitment. Like it is a big, tough test. It's a big deal. But no, I was glad to see you finish that. And so we're going to talk Texas SHRM today. We're going to talk the HR Global Conference that's coming up in September 14th. And you are leading that. You're going to talk, a little bit about the conference and what people should expect. But before we get into that, I would love for you to share just a little bit about your organization, and that is Global Expansion. For those who aren't familiar with Global Expansion, share a little bit about Global Expansion and how you serve your customers.
I love that. Thank you so much for introing it. So let me tell you a little bit about this organization. So Global Expansion is a professional employment organization, but we specialize in employer of record services. Our company's been around since 1999, and we're actually owned by a software as a service company called Equus. But our main source of what we do and what I do every day is I help companies that are looking to move their talent, hire talent, retain talent in international markets where they don't have a business entity set up. So we're able to employ them compliantly and legally. We pay all the taxes and social burdens in country so that they're able to keep those people or deploy projects into international markets or hire local talent. That's what we do. It's a pretty cool role in a great company.
That is so exciting. I will tell you, there's probably some people listening right now going, I was not familiar with Global Expansion. I need to learn more. And so I appreciate you sharing that. Hey, I want to kick this off with letting our listeners get to know you a little bit more. I would love for you to share the Meredith Morris story. Like, where did you grow up and how in the world did you get into leadership and mobility and now serving the HR community?
I love that. Okay, thank you. Let me share a little bit about myself. I'm actually a native Houstonian. So I was born and raised in Houston, even though both my parents were from northern Louisiana, but they had relocated to this area. And that's been quite some time ago. So born and raised, native Houstonian, graduated from the University of Houston. That's where I actually got a degree in marketing. So I originally was going to be a teacher. So this may lend to as we continue our conversation. But I remember my mom looking at me saying, okay, you may want to think about a business degree because you can always teach with a business degree. So, and my mom was a recruiter. And so she recruited talent all the time. So it was a smart move on my end, but that's basically kind of the story. So I live in Katy in a suburb outside of Houston. I have two boys. I have one who's a freshman in college at Texas State University. And then I have a junior in high school gearing up. I'll be an empty nester in another year or so. So that'll be interesting. And of course, I have my fur baby, Australian Shepherd, who's 11 years old, and his name is Boo.
Yeah, I love that. I love Houstonian. I don't know if I've interviewed different people from Houston. I don't think anybody's referred to that as Houstonian yet. I love that. And I love how you talked about your mom talking about, you want to be a teacher. When I hear things like that, always think about the people in our lives that have just kind of guided us on our way. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about, you talked about your mom helping you kind of guide through, from being a teacher to a business leader. Talk about, I don't know, maybe were there a couple of other mentors on your journey that have helped you get to where you are today? And if it was, what was it about them?
Yeah, I think that that's a really interesting question, Bruce, that you're talking about, like people who touch your lives,
Yeah.
those that influence you or give you advice, whether it's kind of soft advice or someone saying, no, 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 don't make that mistake. You really, really shouldn't do that. I think that, there's always a good mix of individuals in your life. And I know you asked about, maybe a couple of key people, but I will tell you through my journey in my career, I have had many different mentors and, people who have invested and been giving of advice that has helped me to understand my career growth. And so I think that when we look at those individuals and how they've touched us and what they've said and what rings true, it's good when someone takes that time.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I do have a couple people who've been, early on in my career, my very first boss, because I started my first job when I was 17 years old. And I stayed with that original company for 22 years.
Wow.
I literally was working with that company part-time in high school. That was my first job. And then I stayed with them through college and then ended up making a career change because I got recruited. But my boss at that time was, a big influencer in my growth and like getting into management and understanding people. But then as that time went on, I had other mentors from women business owners who were running their own organizations and, and then other leaders that I've come across throughout my career and throughout this journey. And I'll tell you that I have a couple who are really dear to my heart. Debbie Dalt is dear, very, very dear to my heart. She's a great leader, and she's a good friend and a good influencer who's given some sound advice. Peggy Smith is another one that, I'm really, really thankful for her for a lot that she's done and patches here and there. But then, you have like a Jack Jample who's always giving within our industry of mobility and, influence. And, Michael Piker. I mean, there's been a lot of great people throughout my career that have been there for me. I feel like everybody has great influencers and that you should recognize and listen to what they're saying, because when people are offering, it's good to listen.
Yeah, no question. I actually had Debbie Dalt written down. We were going to definitely talk about Debbie. Debbie led, we're going to talk today about this Texas SHRM Global HR Conference, and Debbie led it from the start. More than 20 years, I think. She has been an influence on many people, So I'm glad you shared that. And I do want to ask you this question. I want to go ahead and ask you now. You today are leading the Texas SHRM HR Global Conference. Debbie led it for many, many years. Were you part of that before? Were you on the committee? What led you to lead that and take the torch?
So I attended for many years. I was just an attendee. Then Debbie invited me to help on the committee. We laugh about this. She says the only reason she asked me to help on the committee was because I think like 2 or 3 years in a row, I won the grand prize. So I couldn't win the prize anymore if I was on the committee.
I love that. I love that. That's fantastic. You're on the board now. You can't be in the drawing. That's fantastic.
You can't be on the drawing anymore, so you have to join the committee. So I joined the committee, which was great because I mentioned it earlier, I love knowledge, and it was a great opportunity for me to be able to get more in-depth learning, meet, different individuals from different practices and sectors within the HR community to broaden my experience and my level of understanding.
I love that. Yeah, Debbie is also a former state director. She's former Dallas HR chapter president. I've gotten to know her through that circle, through the mobility world. And then of course she led, Texas SHRM state director for many years. And then as since she started the conference, the Texas SHRM HR, Global HR Conference. Now here you are with an opportunity to take what she's built and just continue to build on that. I love that. For those listening, talk a little bit about the Texas SHRM Global HR Conference. What is the Global HR Conference all about?
So the Texas SHRM Global HR Conference is a one-day conference, and it's solely focused. And I don't want to box it in, because
Okay.
I want to make sure that I'm equitable and inclusive. I think that that's really important, because a lot of times when people hear, oh, it's all global HR, it is focused on global human resources content. This specific conference is the only one that does focus on global HR holistically across the different practices in its entirety. So I think when I say that, that's really what we focus all of the content, and our educational content that's put together in the conference. It's all driven by other global HR practitioners that are living and breathing this every day. And you know this from your SHRM-CP training. So I'm going to throw this out there on the podcast. Listen, everybody that's in HR is eventually going to touch global. Okay. It may not be part of what you do every day, but having a little bit of that knowledge and having that in your repertoire of skills and in your back pocket for future learnings, I think is important. So, and there's some, some professionals that obviously they're dealing in it every day, some on grand scales, some that just get launched into it, like literally your company does, an acquisition of a foreign entity, and all of a sudden you went from a US domestic practitioner to now I'm global. So this is the conference for you. It's one that actually focuses on many different areas and covering different topics that that these practitioners find relevant in what they're having to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
I love how you shared that, because people are always looking for ways to add more value or try to continue to grow in their career. And this is one of the ways that they can do that, even though you're right. They may not think they touch it today. Even in mobility, a lot of times people in talent acquisition don't realize they touch mobility, but they do in some way. But this is the chance for you to come and just learn, network with different people, and really just increase your, I don't know, just increase your value in the organization, right?
I would agree with you. And I think the one thing that, we've learned is that this conference is a smaller conference. It's not like some of the big ginormous ones where there's hundreds of thousands of people converging into these massive convention centers. And we made a determined call to keep it small because of, our attendees and their feedback. They loved being able to meet other practitioners. They were able to grow their network. They're able to talk in a low-key environment that's, that allows their voice to have, a say and sharing of information. So, our conference is typically 250 or less people. And I think we're going to keep it that size. I know this year we're definitely keeping it that size.
Yeah,
It's 200 or less.
I love that. Hey, talk a little bit about, you talked about, hey, it's a chance for you to come and learn and grow. Talk a little bit about maybe some of the, I don't know, some of the topics that might be covered. So people that are listening right now that are thinking, you know what, I need to check that conference out. I might, you know what, I'm going to go this year. What would they expect to see as far as topics?
Sure, let me share that with you. So we're still rounding them out
Okay.
and looking for some amazing content speakers.
Mm-hmm.
But, our topics basically, we always cover immigration. That's always a hot topic in global. So let's not
Yeah,
leave that one alone or off the
sure.
table. And That also includes tax. There's always a tax session. When you talk about global, you can never get away from immigration or tax. Let's just face it. Those are two key areas and components. But some of the other areas that we're speaking about, we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're doing a total rewards. We're bringing back HR analytics. We did a session last year on HR analytics, and I can tell you it was like the most sought after one that we did. We will be doing a C-suite panel. Last year, we heard from CHROs. This year, we're hearing from 3 high-profile C-level executives, a CEO, a CFO, and a COO, so that they can talk about from their vision and their lens as far as the organization and what they're looking for from their teams, and the strategies as far as their companies are concerned and how they're going to be viewing the future. So, and then we're doing a global talent acquisition session, and this year, we're actually looking at adding, and we are going to do a session. So for that global, or really your HR department of one, or new entry into global HR, we are actually doing a session that's really focused on different tools that practitioners that may not have to deal with global every day, or they got thrown into global, having that access and information on how do I find that. And of course, we'll hear some stuff from our national SHRM, which is super exciting. They always share good information. So I think as we continue to round these out, we'll talk about, we also have an intercultural session. So talking about language of different of your teams that you bring in from other locations. And it doesn't even have to be that, just even different cultures and business language. So I think we have a good rounded out day.
This is energizing, Meredith.
Seriously.
Oh my gosh. I was thinking about earlier, we just had our spring meeting event, and I was going to mention immigration just continues to be like that growth area. And then like you said, you can't have a conference without talking about immigration and tax. Love that. Love all of this. I will tell you also, you mentioned HR analytics being popular. When we asked a corporate panel recently about what they want from suppliers and what do they need to help them in their jobs, that's what they talked about. They talked about data. They talked about analytics. So that continues to be big. I love the C-suite panel. That's fantastic. You also were instrumental in putting together a big panel for a fall conference for NTRP a few years ago of women leaders. And you're so good at that. How do you do that? I mean, I guess you built a lot of connections over the years, haven't you?
I have built a lot of connections, but it's not just about the connections. It's about, wanting people to share their voice and their experience and their expertise. And, I realize that everyone is busy. And sometimes when you get into the higher level roles where the demands of your position can be consuming, I would say, if you don't ask, you may not receive. So, I always feel like everyone is willing to share their expertise, and, it's just that they have the time to share it. So I typically am not one that's afraid to say, hey, could you do this? We'd really love for you to come share this with our folks. I mean, if you come to the conference, you're there for a reason. You're there to learn. You're there to network. I mean, everybody has an agenda. And so, I feel like just trying to fit the different pieces into multiple agendas, that's the tough piece.
So this could be September 14th. It's going to be in Houston, Texas. You can get information at texashrm.org and just click on the Global HR Conference. Hey, I want to ask you this question. And I gave you a few things we're going to talk about today, but one of the things that continues to come up is employee experience, and not just the employee experience. Then we talk about, well, what about for a conference, the attendee experience? Like, what are you hoping the outcome is whenever people come and they say, hey, I'm going to register, I'm going to go to this conference? What are you hoping that attendee experience is?
I have to tell you, as far as the attendee experience, and you're right. Okay, there is an employee experience, but there's also an attendee experience. And, for people to take a whole day out of their schedule it has to be meaningful, not just meaningful to them, but meaningful to their business and meaningful to practice. So when I think about that experience, I think about engagement. I think about
Mm.
interaction. I think about knowledge. I think about a mix of, of that day where it doesn't seem so like droning and like you're just moving from session to session, and even with the feedback that we received, our attendees last year, they're like, can you make it a little bit shorter? Like, we
Mm.
kind of prefer to go from like 9 to 4, not like 8 to 5. And I was like,
Mm.
you know what? Yeah, because guess what? We've all got kind of like that work-life balance happening. So why shouldn't we do that too? So we've adjusted the hours, but that's what I think about, Bruce. I think about like,
Mm.
what is it that's going to make someone walk in that conference and go, I must come back next year. I want to be part of this. Like, if I'm going to put my budget together, I'm only going to put it for this conference. If I could only pick from one event, I want it to be this one. And here's why. So it's a lot to try to balance that, because you've got so many different moving pieces. And it's really about not just putting the logistics together and having these amazing speakers come and give it their time, but what is it that I want to give back to that person that's taking their valuable time out of their day and spending it with us?
I love that. I love all of that. That's fantastic. Hey, I want to ask you this question. We talked about Debbie earlier, kind of started this conference. She put together a committee. Obviously, it takes a village, doesn't it, to
It
put
takes
together
a
a conference? Like,
village.
do you have a big committee? Talk a little bit about that.
Actually, we are a small but powerful committee. And just so our listeners know, and anyone who's going to be watching this incredible video, we are all volunteers.
Mm.
So we all do this. We all have full-time jobs, and we're all volunteers. And so on my committee, I have like 8 people on my committee. And we have some support from Texas SHRM. So, we
Hmm.
have Dina, who's awesome. And then, of course, Roseanne and Dustin they're very included as well, but just not in any of the logistics of it. So my team is small but mighty, and they do a lot of work, and they put in quite a few hours. And in the next few months, we'll really be hitting it hard.
I love that. I love all of that. Okay, so you mentioned earlier, we talked about it being a small conference, but when I hear 200, to some people that's a big conference, but it sounds like a really, really good conference. Why 200? I understand this year we have a pretty special venue. Is that right?
We do. So we switched it up a little bit. That was the other thing, is like, we want to evolve and change. And I think that's really important, is you have to evolve and change. And so I was so blessed and so thankful that Monica Mills over at Transocean, at their global headquarters in Houston, offered us her conference space. So we're actually holding the conference at the Transocean building. We have to keep it at 200. That's the capacity of the
Mhm.
space. There's different breakout rooms and meeting rooms. And yes, that's where we're holding it. And that's why we have a limited number of seats.
And so if somebody wants to sponsor, can they still sponsor the conference?
Yes, we still have sponsorships open and available, but those are also limited. So we don't just take everyone that wants to, participate. We have a limited number of sponsorships, and then once those are sold, they're sold.
I always like to ask my guests about stories, because I think a lot of times when we get involved in certain things, it's because something has impacted us. And years ago, and I would love to hear your story, but years ago I attended the conference, and Debbie had I think it was Tommy Schnellenberger was there. I was looking back just now for those who are listening right now. I was looking back in my personal library to find his book, but just an amazing keynote. And it seems like each year there is someone that is a keynote speaker that really inspires a group and really brings everybody together. So when I left the conference, I remember thinking, What a great experience. We talked about the attended experience earlier, but I thought,
Yes.
what a great experience because I felt like I was part of something bigger. You have any stories where you had, I don't know, you attended the conference and you just, I mean, it just impacted you. Any thoughts around that?
So last year was my first year as director of the conference.
Okay.
And Debbie was phenomenal at picking out keynotes. So every keynote that we ever heard was just always amazing at this conference,
Yeah.
because that's really what energizes and sets the pace for the day. So, I, like I remember many of these individuals and how they spoke or what they presented, or, from the face reading to the positive language. But last year, I actually got approached through LinkedIn by a masterclass speaker, and that was Walter Bond. And so he actually wrote the book Swim: How a Shark, a Suckerfish, I have it right here on my desk, How a Shark, a Suckerfish, and a Parasite Teach You Leadership, right? So he came in, and I tell you what, like the first conversation with him, I was like, you have to be my speaker. And I'm like, but I don't have money, I can't afford you.
We have
You
Starbucks
have to
gift
work on
cards.
this. But Walter did an amazing job. And when he says he got it there and he did
Yeah.
it great.
Hey, so, okay, we talked about the conference is September 14th. People are going to save the date. They can register at texasSHRM.org, correct?
Well, they can, but we also have our website.
Okay.
So our website is Texas SHRM, SHRM globalconference.org.
Yeah, and I'll put the link in the show notes so that way people can just click on the link and go straight to the registration and get registered, and we would love for you to be there. Hey, let me ask you this. I mean, this is a lot of work. You just mentioned earlier you are not paid by Texas SHRM. You're not a staff member. You are a full-time volunteer. All of your committee members are volunteers. What drives you?
I'm going to tell you what drives me is the sharing of knowledge. And that goes back again, right? I mentioned that, early on in my career, I was going to be a teacher.
Mhm.
But as I've continued to progress, I know that, it's important for people to be able to share their knowledge, share their expertise, and share their information. What drives me when it comes to this specific conference, it's a sharing of knowledge. It's being able to put together these relevant sessions and to be able to give that expertise and knowledge along with access, to individuals to continue that learning.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love that, and I appreciate that. I will tell you, as I look at these I'm just sitting here looking at these topics, and I'm thinking this conference is for anyone and everyone serving the HR and talent acquisition and global mobility community. Because I'm looking here at Department of One. I mean, that's huge. There's so many people. They're like, they don't have any bandwidth. They need people like to be around these types of environments, right? To learn and bring that back to their leadership team. I'm looking at, talent acquisition. I'm looking at total rewards. There's just something for everyone. What are we missing here? Would you agree that if they are serving anywhere in business, this could help them in some way?
I would agree with you 100%. I think that, being an HR practitioner, you may be siloed where in your organization you specialize, right? Maybe I'm a recruiter, I'm a specialist in this, or maybe I'm a talent acquisition professional, I'm a specialist, or maybe I do comp and ben or payroll, but I feel like, this specific conference, that the knowledge and the learning that we put together, it really touches your job, because within an organization, we all touch each other's job one way or another when it comes to bringing that employee on and onboarding them. It's not just a line manager or the recruitment or, payroll. We as holistically as as companies, I would say, I say we, but we do. I feel like within that HR practitioner space, that all of these areas touch each other. And so knowing that just really brings that full cycle knowledge.
Before we pivot here, I want to ask one last question, and that is around an area that is it seems to be very easy for some people, and it's very difficult for other people in this networking. What would you say? How easy is it going to be for someone to come in and network with this group? Because I mean, sometimes it can be daunting going to a conference by yourself. You don't know anyone. You go and you learn. How do you? I don't know. Maybe give a couple of tips on how someone might connect and network at the conference.
I think, thank you for that. I think that's great. And you're right. It is really difficult, especially if you're walking in and you don't know anyone and it's your first time there. I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the things, and I know I've walked in that space before. I think we all have, right? I've gone to things and I'm like, I don't know a single person here. I'm by myself. How am I going to meet people? But I think the one thing about this conference, and quite a bit of the feedback that we received is that, when you're walking in, don't be afraid to meet other people because they're not going to be afraid to meet you. And feel free to call on any one of us that are serving on the committee. We'll walk you around and introduce you to others. And we did do that last year. I actually had some of I have volunteers that show up that thank goodness they raise their hand and say, hey, can we come help with registration? And I'm like, you're hired, but you don't get paid. So, but I think to come in that they have to know and be open-minded to meeting the person next to them. And we do allow enough time for them to be able to meet others. And we do encourage our sponsors that as they're at their exhibit tables, if they're talking to someone, to introduce whoever else is walking up to their table. That's fine because you're going to meet other people in similar industries. Sometimes these people, or sometimes you've seen them at other events. So hopefully we can continue to build that community aspect.
I always like to say too, before you go to the conference, reach out to Meredith, let her know you're coming to the conference, and she'll, because we want to know. Like especially if it's your first time or you're from out of town, we want to know so we can welcome you in and connect you with others, right?
Absolutely. And I actually did have some people do that last year. And so if I was standing at the front or they asked for me, I would come up and grab them. We made connections and it was good.
You will have a great time. Put this on your calendar, save the date, September the 14th, 2023, the Texas SHRM Global HR Conference. I'll put the link in the show notes. Reach out to Meredith if you have any questions and she can help you. Hey, I do want to ask you, you mentioned advice and you've given a lot of advice on the show today. And by the way, you mentioned these mentors earlier, Peggy Smith. I still need to get her on the show. She's fantastic. And then of course, Jack Jampel he's a former guest on the show. He's fantastic. So yeah, all of your mentors, of course, Michael, great. And I can see now why you are also great because you're surrounded by great people. Hey, I would love for you to share. Have you ever been given any advice? Kind of like your mom gave you the advice about the teacher. It's just so good. You just find yourself sharing with others.
I had to think about that, but I think if I'm going to share a few things, I won't share too much, because obviously you can tell like I'm very energetic. So I guess one piece of advice that was given to me is like, and sometimes it's hard for people to think, but if you're not out there, you can't be seen. So in other words, if you're not out there and you're not meeting people, no one's ever going to see who you are and know who you are and know your talents. I would say a piece of advice that Peggy gave me, which I never thought about that, but I'm not one, believe it or not. I know I don't fall on the floor, Bruce, when I say this, but you probably will, but please don't. But I remember Peggy saying to me, she's like, you need to speak up more. And I said to her, I said, listen, I don't speak up all the time because I like to listen. And I want to make sure that whatever words are coming out of my mouth are intelligent. She's like, yeah, but you are intelligent, but you're just not sharing your words. So, I found that to be really interesting. In other words, what she's saying is you need to be a contributor because what you have to say is meaningful and it is important. And so, I would say those are some. And then, Debbie Dalt, she's over the years, she's given me a lot of advice, but one of hers is, continue seeking knowledge and continue to learn from others. And I think that that's really important because when you talk about being a leader, maybe you're not the CEO, but you're your leader. You're the leader of yourself, and you're the one that is driving that vision of who people see you, how you are.
So as you're listening, I want you to write down these words: be seen, speak up, and seek knowledge. That's unbelievable. That's great advice. Thank you, Meredith. I appreciate you sharing that. So good. I know that I always say there's always something that people are going to take away from the show. So when you talk about seeking knowledge, I think a lot of times people listen to the show because they're like, hey, if I can just pick up one thing and I can add that to my growth, then I'm going to be a better leader. So that's fantastic. I love that. Hey, I want to, I told you when you got on, I said, hey, the time's going to really fly by. So get ready.
Oh
And
my
it has,
gosh, it has.
hey, let's shift to it's time to accelerate. I do like to ask some fun questions for my guests. Would you
I
rather
love that.
read a book or listen to an Audible or a podcast?
I'm a book girl. Got to go
Mm,
with books.
love that. Yeah. So you can underline them, highlight them, write in them, all that stuff, right?
Something about turning that page.
Yes. Turn the page, turn the page. Hey, what, I always talk about great leaders. They're grateful leaders. What are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for my family. And I would have to say overall, and you know a lot about my past and some of my experiences over the past couple of years. So I'm grateful for time. I'd have to
Mm,
say that. And I'm grateful for people that I meet and the connections that I make. Like I feel like you meet people every day and there always is a purpose for that. So I would say those are the things that I'm grateful for.
yeah, that's fantastic. And I'm grateful for you and you serving Texas SHRM, doing the work that you're doing is absolutely amazing. Your energy is off the charts. Speaking of energy, what energizes you like every day?
I always have to say what energizes me every day is, getting up and making a difference. But also, I have to say, my kids. I mean, like my
Mm,
boys, they're like the main source of my energy. They're my motivation because I feel like if, I want them to grow up to be strong individuals, but I also want them to be contributors and I want them to be compassionate. And, I feel like if I'm able to lead by example, for them and give them that, then I feel like that's what energizes me.
that's fantastic. My oldest son started out as a Texas State Bobcat.
I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and I remember when we were moving him in the dorms, how my legs were just burning because it's just uphill, like all of the hills. It's a beautiful campus though, isn't it?
It's a beautiful
Yeah,
campus. And
yeah.
yes,
Feel the
yeah,
burn.
the burn. You got to work out for that one for sure.
I I love that. Hey, this is my final question. I love to answer this question. Meredith, 10 years older. She's knocking at your front door and you're going to go answer that door. What's she going to tell you?
She's going to tell me to focus on my goals and not worry what others think,
Mm,
but focus on achieving those goals. That's what my 10-year older person would say to me.
I love that. Goals. That's a
Yeah.
that's a 10-year-old wiser Meredith Mortis. Hey, I appreciate you coming on today and sharing perspective around especially around the Texas SHRM Global HR Conference. It's going to be so good. I cannot wait to see this unfold this year. For those listening, we talked about, I'm going to put the link for the conference in the show notes, but for those listening and they heard something and they want to connect with you, they have questions. How's the best way for them to connect?
They can connect with me either on LinkedIn,
Okay.
please. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a DM, or they're welcome to email me directly if they would like. So meredith.morris@globalexpansion.com.
I will put your LinkedIn link in the show notes so people can connect
Perfect.
with you. And I always like to say, hey, if you reach out to Meredith, say, hey, I heard you on Life in the Leadership Lane podcast. It makes the connection just all of a sudden feel much more connected. I'll put your email in the show notes as well. If you want to
Thank
just
you.
email her directly, ask her a question, come be part of Texas SHRM Global HR Conference this year, September the 14th. 2023. Meredith, it has been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on and sharing today. I appreciate you. I appreciate our friendship, and I can't wait to see what's ahead.
Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure today. Thank you, Bruce, for having me. Thank you for highlighting the conference. A lot of hard work goes into it. So I'm really glad that we're blasting this out and sharing it with others who may not have known it existed. And thank you for your servant leadership on Texas SHRM as well, and your friendship.
Absolutely. I can't wait to share. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks so much.